What a beautiful Thursday morning from here in Lagos. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Kayode Okikiolu, but not to worry. I'm not the only one this morning, right?
No, you are definitely not, Kayode. I'm Ayo Makinde here live in Abuja. And this is the first time we're doing this, right? Intercity anchoring. Well, just so you know, there are some interesting developments that have come, Kayode, but apparently it seems like you have seen a crystal ball somewhere. But let's just go straight into the papers. First of all, we have with us here this morning, joining us for the papers, Catherine Agbo, who is the deputy editor-in-chief of Daily Asset newspaper. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
So let's begin with the Nigerian Tribune. You've, of course, know what's been happening about Buhari's summon. That's the lead of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. PDP lawmakers, lawyers disagree with Malami. That story you will find on page 2. Reps step down motion on admittance of president, security chiefs into chambers. And of course, there's a lot of quotes on the front page right there. What do you make of this? I mean, there was no issues as to whether or not the president should address the National Assembly. And then this.
Okay, so it was a situation of hopes dashed yesterday.
Really?
Yes, because a lot of Nigerians were hopeful that the president was going to go before the House of Representatives to talk to them about the security situation in the country, because it's a huge problem right now. Nigeria is in a very dire situation as it concerns security, and it affects everybody. So everybody looked forward to that, to get a kind of reassurance from the president that, look, this is what we are doing. These are the measures we are putting in place. I want to assure you as president of the country that we are working and you'll be fine. But what did we find? We saw a situation where in the last minute, the president backed out, even after there were earlier statements from his aides confirming that he was going to be there. And then that statement by the Attorney General of the Federation saying that the National Assembly, or the House of Representatives, had overstepped their bounds by inviting the president. I don't know how the AGF chose to interpret the Constitution in that manner, in a manner I would call political, because the AGF was clearly interpreting the position of the party that brought him into that office.
But which one should be valid here? The position of the party or the position of the Constitution? The
position of the Constitution. And that is what the AGF swore to uphold.
But that is, exactly, that's supposed to be the job of the Attorney General of the Federation.
Because when the Attorney General tells you that the National Assembly is not constitutionally empowered to summon the president, but the same Constitution says the National Assembly can summon anybody, any public office holder. And this National Assembly is representing Nigerians, and Nigerians put the president in that office. So when the National Assembly says come, it is Nigerians that have said come. They are the ones that put you in that office. And the AGF also forgets that it is the same National Assembly that makes the laws that empower the president to carry out his own constitutional roles, which include security of the lives and property of Nigerians.
Well, what do you think is at play here? Anyway, maybe as we go along on the front page of the papers, we'll see a number of other things, and then we'll be able to look at it from that perspective. But then, right here, right above the nameplate, how Buhari APC NEC agreed with Osinbajo's council to adopt state ESCOs as caretakers, and that also is there. But of course, you know that this talk about the Electoral Act has been in the works for a while. Electoral Act new bill mandates INEC on electronic collation of results, smart card readers, and all of that. That story is on page 30. I wonder what many people will make of that, but maybe we should just wait and see how far that law will go. Well, that's the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Kayode.
Well, let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper for you. The lead story, as you'll expect, concerns insecurity. Why Buhari can't honor Rep's summons. AGF Malami says National Assembly lacks constitutional powers to summon president. No formal communication on the issue. House spokesman Malami speaking APC's mind, reps minority leader. I think that lends credence to what you said earlier. We're not part of Buhari's summon to NAS senators. President shouldn't come, says Omoagege. Sands back Malami says National Assembly can't summon president. Buhari faults foreign media reports on NSAS. Quite a lot of issues, really. You have touched on some of them, but this one really is a downer for me, just right under that big picture that shows the president, administering the oath of office on the INEC chairman for a second term. Right under that picture, you see over 9.5 million Nigerian girls out or not in school. That's coming from UNFPA. I don't think this is related to the ASU strike or COVID-19, maybe, but seeing 9.5 million Nigerian girls not in school, how does that hit you?
Okay, so it's a very unfortunate situation. It's sad that at a time like this we have so many children out of school, not just girls, but there are so many children out of school in Nigeria in their millions. And then when you look at the statistics for the girls, it clearly shows you the imbalances that have been going on, and coming at a time when we are talking about the 16 days of activism, gender activism, which ends today. It shows you that there is a lot that needs to be done. Deliberate efforts need to be done to ensure that children are in school, and girls particularly, because in our society there are some cultures and even some religions where that do not really encourage education, especially of the girl child. So it's fine that this issue is out on the front burner, and it's an issue that we need to continue talking about. It shouldn't end at just reeling out the statistics, but deliberate efforts must be done. Laws must be put in place. There must be conscious efforts, budgeting, efforts at the state and local levels to ensure that enrollment of children in school improves, especially the girl child. If it needs to be incentivized, fine, but whatever needs to be done must be done.
But even how about that conversation around the Child Rights Act being domesticated in each of the states? That's also something that could help, right?
Yes, it's also something that could help, and it's quite sad also that so many years after the Child Rights Act, some states have not domesticated that act in their states. And even in the states where it has been domesticated, how far has this law been tested? The problem of Nigeria has always been enforcement of available laws, not a lack of laws, because Nigeria has so many laws, including the Child Rights Act, which should take care of issues such as this. So that act needs to be domesticated in all states, and the provisions of the law need to be enforced to the letter in those states.
I would have asked you about this story on top of the nameplate. FG unfolds 7-point agenda to tackle Apapa gridlock. But, you're in Abuja, so I'm sure that headache is not for you, as maritime workers shelve planned strike. But more details on page 11 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. You might want to touch on that, but quickly, sports news on the back page. Ayo, you might remember that story yesterday about we gonna beat Nigeria. Well, it seems Ghana came through with their promise. Black satellites stunned F Eagles.
I really did understand it only after I saw the results.
Oh, absolutely.
So it should have been reversed, but unfortunately it wasn't.
So Ghana 1, Nigeria 0. That's what we have from that match yesterday. Well, I wasn't quite happy, but it's sports. You win some, you lose some. That's the Vanguard for you this morning.
A very, very pleasant one to lose, trust me. Not at this time. The Blueprint newspaper leads with this one. Buhari's summons tears National Assembly apart. Senate disowns lower chamber. Reps chicken out. That's the way it appears on the front page. Malami faults lawmakers, says President rights discretionary. You're wrong. Lawyers, PDP Minority Caucus tackle AGF. Why Buhari won't honor summons. That's according to the APC governors. And one other thing, well, yes, I mean, Kadi, we have talked about it, but then let me ask you, Catherine. Another thing is that this has gone on for so long. Why are these issues coming up now? Why is the AGF, why did the AGF have to wait until the day before to raise these issues? Why do the APC governors have to say now and not at that time?
Okay, so you see all of these issues happening. There's this thing they say about the witch crying at night and the baby dying in the morning. Now, the APC governors were first to say that they were not comfortable, express their discomfort with the summons by the House of Reps on the president. And it's so sad because these governors, you would think that they would be more interested in something like this because the people that are affected by this insecurity are in their states. These governors do not have a police. We have a federal police. So you find a situation where the governors do not have total control of security in their states, as it were. And then somebody is saying, look, the person that is in charge, on whose table the buck stops, should come and tell us what is going on. And the governors, for their own selfish reasons, as I read in the papers, saying that it's going to, if that happens, it's going to give impetus to the houses of assembly to begin to summon governors, incessantly.
And what could be wrong with that?
And what could be wrong with that? Because these people represent the people that put you there. So if they invite you to come explain things to them, I don't see what is wrong with that. So somebody is saying, somebody is even practically offering to help you to do, to make life better for you, to make your job better, and you're saying no. And then the Senate saying that they are not part of the summons, they don't know anything about.
Meanwhile, it was supposed to be a joint assembly.
And it is one national assembly. So you begin to wonder. And what they have done is what they have clearly done right now. They have put Nigeria in a situation where people will now no longer be talking about insecurity, which is the main issue. That issue will now go to the back, and the issue of whether the president should appear before the National Assembly or not will become the issue on the front burner.
Today is Thursday. We haven't heard from the presidency, have we? So maybe we should wait if that time comes or not. But then, right under the nameplate, INEC, Nigerians set agenda as Yakubu begins final tenure. Technological innovations, e-voting imperative, APC, BMO. Pursue amendment to Electoral Act. PDP and CSO say new electoral laws ready Q1 of 2021. Are you hopeful?
Oh, well, I would say I'm hopeful, and I really hope that by the time we get to the next round of general elections in 2023, we would have put measures in place for electronic voting, or at least collation of votes results electronically, because it's been tested in other programs and it's been shown to work.
Okay. All right.
So why not?
All right, Kade, that's Blueprint today.
Well, next up is the Guardian newspaper, leading with constitutional crisis looms as Buhari shuns NAS invitation. I mean, that's a big story, really, because we're still counting down to that planned appearance, and I mean, as you've said, it's still quite uncertain. Writers, NAS has no power to summon Nigeria, or rather to summon Buhari, AGF Malami insists. Senate disowns reps, insists on removal of service chiefs. So yes, the controversy, the uncertainty is still on. That story starts on the front page of The Guardian and continues on page 2. So you have the pictures, definitely, of the Speaker, AGF, and the Senate President. And right next to those pictures, Nigerians lament monumental corruption. Country loses $43 billion to corruption, says header. Worst graft perpetrated through illicit financial flows, says ICPC. EFCC says cooperation needed to defeat cankerworm. That story continues on page 2. And recall that survey by the ICPC saying that the judiciary is the most corrupt, or at least in terms of grand corruption, the judiciary has been offered way more bribes and incentives than the executive, legislature, or even the private sector. So really, where do we begin if they say that we need cooperation to defeat this cankerworm? Just where do we need to begin from?
Nigeria has laws that should be tested in issues of corruption. Nigeria has two anti-corruption agencies, the EFCC and the ICPC. But corruption is so deeply entrenched in the country that in spite of all this, there's been no change. So when we talk about cooperation, I don't know cooperation at what level, but there needs to be also a reorientation of the minds of Nigerians right from when they are young, because the seed of corruption has been sown, and it's so deeply rooted in all spheres of life, in all sectors of the country, everywhere from the schools, from secondary, primary schools, where you find even parents paying for their children to pass examinations. So it's beyond corruption of stealing from government coffers. It's corruption at all levels, and everybody is involved at all levels, parents and their children, students in the universities, lecturers, everywhere. It's everywhere. So there needs to be a kind of reorientation.
Seed of corruption has been sown. That really hit me deep. Right on top of those pictures, you see NCC suspends SIM card registration by network operators. And what might interest you is the fact that there are about 207 million active SIM cards in the country. Maybe that's why the MPC says our population is 206 million in Nigeria. That will be an interesting read, definitely, on page 19 of the Guardian newspaper this morning. That's the Guardian for you.
All right, the Leadership newspaper is next and leads with this one. Southern leaders reject calls for another confab. That story is on page 4. Only patriotism will solve our problems, according to ACF. It's a waste of time, resources, Afenifere says. NCPF, let's keep the conversation open, according to Pandef. Be courageous to implement 2014 confab report, Ohaneze tells federal government. That story is right there on the front page. So what do you make of all of this? Well, that talk has been on about another confab or not. What do you make of all of this?
I do not think that Nigeria needs to hold another confab at this time, because there's been so many that have been held, and the reports and the recommendations from those confabs have not been implemented. The latest one, the last one, was the one of 2014. And the recommendations of the confab have not been implemented. So let us rather go back and look at the reports of the confabs that have been held in the past. How far have we implemented those provisions? Are there any recommendations in those reports that can solve the problems that we are talking about, those issues that are making the people calling for another confab? Are there solutions to those problems in those previous reports? So let us go back and look at those reports. And even apart from the confab reports, there are so many laws. I say this all the time, that Nigeria has enough laws for most of the challenges that we face. So it is not calling another confab, for me, is not the solution. We already have so many reports that we can dust up and look at, and our solutions, the solutions we are looking for, may just be there.
Interesting. Well, that conversation, I guess, started in 2014 with the ruling party calling for a review of some of the recommendations of that law. Let's just see what happens. AFDB to African leaders: unlock $1 trillion pension insurance funds to grow economy. Of course, you know that there's been a lot of talk about whether or not to touch pension funds. One of the recommendations in the new Finance Bill 2020 at the National Assembly is that government should begin to look at some unclaimed dividends and some dormant accounts and all of that. But to unlock $1 trillion pension and insurance funds to grow the economy, what do you make of it?
Okay, if those funds are lying dormant and there is a law that says these funds can be applied to solve the problems that we have, to meet some of our economic challenges, then I think those laws should be applied.
For you, it just has to be the law.
Yeah, if it is legal. If it is legal, and then mechanisms must be put in place to ensure that this money does not go the way other funds go, because that has always been the fear. Because this money belongs to people. This is people's pension we are talking about. So these funds must not be mismanaged.
Some of them
so
could be yours.
I have not read the law, that particular aspect of the law. So I do not know for sure what it says and how it says those funds can be applied. But I mean, if it is legal and the funds are lying there and we are sure that this money, mechanisms have been put in place to ensure that this money will not be mismanaged, then let's use it by all means.
Okay. Well, that's the leadership this morning, Kayode.
Well, clearly, you're a stickler for the rule of law. But take a look at Nigerian News Direct. Insecurity pressure mounts on Buhari to turn down NAS invitation. You have no power to summon the president, Malami tells NAS. You're wrong, Onoesoke, PDP chieftain, tells Malami. So yeah, that's the lead story. But right under that, you see, ASU strike will shut down all private varsities, NAN's president. Are you surprised by that statement? The NAN's president saying they'll shut down all private varsities?
Yes, when I saw that headline, I was surprised. I do not know how he intends to do that, or how NANS intends to do that, but I know that there was a time that NANS was very vibrant. It was clearly the voice of all Nigerian students. If NANS spoke, everybody concerned listened, because NANS was not a toothless bulldog at that time. It's no longer the same today. The NANS we see today is not the NANS we knew before. So if this new NANS president has something different he's bringing to the table to bring an end to the ASU strike, which has lingered for so long and with no solution in sight. If he has a solution to it, and if he thinks that shutting down the private universities, which have become the first choice and no longer an alternative, would be the solution. Let's see how he's going to go about that. He did not say how he intends to go about that, so we do not know for sure, but we'll wait and see how he intends to go about it.
Well, it's been very, very interesting having you this morning. We have to say thank you very much for your time. Catherine Agbo is Deputy Editor-in-Chief, Daily Asset newspaper. Thank you so much again for your time and thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
So Sunrise Daily is back in a moment. Do stay with us. Well, this morning, to have this conversation with us about the continued border closure, of course, we have heard the president say over and over again, well, I mean, just in the recent past that, hey, it's about time we began to consider reopening the borders again because of the effect so far on the Nigerian economy. This is where we are now, but we do not have a specific date yet as to when the borders will be closed. And there are so many conversations around this. Of course, you listening to the CBN president just now, you say that one of the things that they expected the border closure will achieve is to facilitate increased or improved patronage of our products and services in Nigeria. This is what we have at this time, but let's speak with a couple of gentlemen who will be able to speak to us on how far so far and what their expectations are about the reopening of the borders. Onalo Akwa joins us from Nasarawa State virtually. He is the Director General, Poultry Farmers Association of Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time. He joins us along with Adeyemi Adeniji, who is agro-entrepreneur and an exporter, Chief Executive Officer of Starling Global and Ideal Limited. He is an exporter of cocoa and cashew. He joins us from Lekki, also virtually. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this morning. Let me begin with you, Mr. Akpa. Of course, it's in the news, so many things that a number of your members have said about the effect of this whole conversation about the border closure on your business. How has it helped or harmed your business and that of your members? Just told them that we're yet to have Mr. Akpa, but let's go to Mr. Adeniji. Well, you are in the business of importing and exporting of cocoa and cashew, and you are an agricultural entrepreneur. What's your take on this border closure and the fact that it has lasted this long?
Well, good morning. I think it's just to give us another impression about what the policymakers have already been doing to us since God knows when. It is another policy somersault. What has changed? Nothing. What we have only experienced is another action, which will take us a longer time before we'll be able to get back there. For example, look at the port. All normal goods that are normally supposed to go on the roads, even when the roads are bad, linking other West African countries, were stopped just because people felt people are dumping goods on Nigeria. Has anything changed? Nothing. People still smuggle all these goods. The port is now congested because some of these goods that are supposed to go on the road are now being transported to our port. That is already very terrible. Unfortunately for us, the port itself, we have only one that is functional, maybe, or now just coming up. And the volume of containers coming to Nigeria is serious. And the rent takers, that's the owners of the port, have taken advantage to make Nigeria poorer than what they were before the closure. For example, what was the price of a bag of rice before the closure of the border? What is it today? So everything has gone very terribly. And I cannot see the positive effect of the border closure. If the government has problems with people bringing in goods, we have our land borders. It will surprise you that some cars that even come in through Nigerian ports will get out, and you still see custom on the roads looking for them. So something fundamental is wrong with our policy and the policymakers.
But Mr. Adeniji, you would also recall that on a number of occasions we've heard the president and some of his officials also say that a core reason for closing the borders, at the land borders in particular at this time, is to at least as much as possible control the inflow of small arms that have been responsible for incessant acts of banditry and other forms of criminality. Don't you think that's in any way been played out?
Well, I'm shocked that you are even saying this. Don't you see, as it's become better, the banditry has increased. Nobody is safe in this country again. You can't go on the road. You can't go anywhere. Have you forgotten so many people that were kidnapped and they will have to pay themselves? It's even getting worse in every part of the country. Not only in the north again. It's everywhere. So small harms are here with us. What have we done to stop that? Nothing. Look, I want to give an example. Today, I buy cocoa from Cross River State. Cocoa still comes in from Cameroon into Nigerian border, and they cross. There are so many porous borders that all these things can come in through. It's just terrible political mistake. and policies from as such. And if it's not quickly reversed, it's going to get the country deeper into recession. Because you need to trade. Unfortunately, we signed the African
Take an alternate
Continental.
opinion, Mr. Adeniji, on this matter. I understand that Mr. Onalo Akwa has just joined us. He is the Director General, Poultry Farmers Association of Nigeria. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Akwa. Well, this continued border closure is raising a lot of concerns in some quarters. Are you also as concerned?
Well, I am also as concerned as the entire poultry farmers in this country. In the last few months that the border had been closed, I think there have been some positive, mixed positive and negative benefits to the border closure. As a poultry farmer and as an administrator of poultry industry in this country, it has been a mixed feeling. A mixed feeling in the sense that Nigeria is a founding member of ECOWAS, and part of the protocol and treaty of the Economic Community of West African States is free movement of goods and services within the West African sub-regions. And what actually led to the closure of the border has been the other nations surrounding us undermining the territorial integrity and then the trade integrity of this country. I think that is the first thing that led to the closure of the border by Mr. President. And we've had some positive and negative impacts of the border closure. I will speak from the perspective of the poultry farming in this country. Before the closure of the border, there had been a lot of smuggling of poultry and poultry products into this country, which actually was negatively affecting the poultry industry. Yes, although the protocol says there should be free movement of goods and services into this country, but it's not to undermine the economy of each of the country in the West African sub-region. Particularly, we've had a case whereby smuggling of poultry products, especially frozen chicken, into Nigerian had actually wanted to shut down the meat industry of this country. And when we had the border closure, I think the poultry industry in Nigeria has actually grown exponentially in the last few months. To say that, we also look at the other aspect of it. Today, every poultry farmer operating in this country is operating at a loss because the cost of production has actually gone up. We've now been able our local production of maize has never been able to actually meet the demand of the economy. A lot of protagonists of trade had says, look, there is no need for us to bring in maize. Yes, there is no need for us to bring in maize. We have the arable land, we have the potential, we have everything to produce maize. Today, the price of maize is on the rooftop. Now, the price of soya, which is the only basic plant protein source for production of poultry, is on the rooftop. But we are now looking at it and look, if the government in their wisdom says they were going to close the border, and they actually did close the border, and today they say they want to look at reopening the border. Now, with mixed feelings, we also say they should open the border, because if you open the border and you are able to control the smuggling that has actually taken over the economy, ruining our economy, then we should be able to do proper policing of the porous borders that we have. Today, I'm afraid that if you open the borders like it has been done between the southern part of this country and then the other parts of the country, then I'm afraid that unwholesome poultry products with broken down cold chain value will flood into this market again. And then this will put a lot of poultry farmers under pressure. A lot of people, almost 90% of the people operating in the poultry industry in Nigeria, took their money from the bank in form of loans. And then if you now say, okay, poultry products coming from Europe, coming from South America, coming from North America into this country, although it is restricted, but people smuggle most of them. And then a lot of pressure is going to bear. And then the poultry industry that presently employs between 15 to 20 million Nigerians in direct and indirect employment, then unemployment will be eroded. And then a lot of people will be thrown back into the unemployment market. And then that is to say that the insecurity we are having today will also be increased. But on the other hand, if you open the border and then there is a proper policing of what comes into this country legally based on our fiscal policies, and what does not come in otherwise, then we'll be able to also do the free trade, like bringing alternative plant protein source like granite cake from Cameroon, from Chad, onto this country, but let it be legitimate. But it's kind of a situation whereby smuggling has taken over the whole place and then undermining the critical sector of the economy, like the poultry, is what we are against it. Because we have it on record and it is in our statistics that over 1 million metric tons of frozen chicken comes into this country illegally through smuggling. So what do we do to police it actually? To make sure that the local investment and people's money does not go down into the drain. That is our quarrels. But
Mr.
Adeniji, trade. Yeah.
Right. Pardon me. Mr. Adeniji believes that this border closure is a policy somersault. I just want to get your opinion on that. Do you agree with him?
You see, policy is not a cast and iron issue. You see, when you look at your policy and you look at your operational mechanism, what is actually happening, then based on that, you can take decisions that is to protect your economy, decisions that has to protect the integrity of even the policy we are saying. Policy somersault is also has to do with human face. Now, if you now says, because the ECOWAS treaty says free movement of goods and services, and then you allow your country to be used as a route to dumping products on the other economy, you are undermining the integrity and then the sovereignty of that country. So invariably, you are putting that country at a jeopardy. So policy is not a cast and iron issue. Policy
so you don't think
has to be looked up to at every particular time.
So you don't think this is a policy somersault?
Your policy based on what is prevailing.
So you don't think
it's not a policy somersault because I'm a policy person.
Right.
You see, you have to look at your policy. How does it affect you as a person? How does it affect the generality of the people you govern? And then you change it at any particular point in time.
Let's speak with Mr. Adeniji. Well, you've said, this is a policy somersault. Well, Mr. Akpa believes that it isn't. But your business specifically now, the government said this was meant to ensure self-sufficiency in food production. You produce food, as it were. You're a farmer. In that regard, you export. And the question will be, during that border closure, was there any benefit whatsoever to your business?
Is it in terms of the reopening of the border or the closure of the border?
During the period which the border remained closed, was there any benefit whatsoever to your business?
Yeah, there were a lot of benefits. I will tell you categorically that within the period of the border closure, the poultry industry grew by almost 17%. Because there is strong market.
Mr. Akpa, forgive me.
Mr.
Akpa, forgive me. I actually thought it was Mr. Adeniji speaking. Apparently, you sounded like... But that question is for Mr. Adeniji. You get to respond to that. But let's take on Mr. Adeniji first.
Thank you.
Well, even more surprised that Mr. Akpa is saying that there was the closure of the border has really made the poultry farm becoming better. That is not true. What's the price of the day-old chick today? What's the price of the food to give to these birds? What I think the government and everybody that is a participant in this Nigerian economy should be looking at is, one, today we have signed an agreement with African Intercontinental Free Trade Agreement. This is going to, whether we like it or not, we are going to open our borders. What we should be looking at is how do we export more of these things to other West African or African countries? We should increase our production. We should increase our capacity so that we're not going to be left behind in the free trade agreement we have signed. Today, if we think we want to be protecting, we want to protect our industry by closing the borders, at the end of the day, and we need to implement this agreement, we are going to be in trouble. It has not added any value. Sincerely, everything has gone up. The price of chicken, are we able to produce enough chicken for this country, even when the border is closed? Not at all. These people still smuggle this frozen chicken through different means. Don't you see contraband rice or still in the market? This chicken, we're only being very economical with the truth. These things are still coming to this country. What we need to do is, as a country, We need a policy, immediate, middle-term, long-term policies that will bring a lot of entrepreneurs from this country to produce more with our population. We can dominate all the West African countries, even if it's only to send all our goods to them, our food, because we have comparative advantage, competitive advantage over every other West African countries because of our population.
You know, Mr. Adeniji, I want to explore your experience really during this border closure. I think it would be important to hear firsthand from you the kind of experience you had during this border closure. As an exporter, did you have to export through the land border or through the ports?
Well, naturally, I don't even go through the land, but it has caused a lot of trouble today. I think in the news report you just read this morning, I had the issue of the maritime people want to go on strike. The port is a mess. It's even more terrible now. If anybody needs to go to Apapa, Chinese television, you understand it. We are in a big mess. We're only trying to cover and don't want to offend people. The trouble is getting worse. The port is bad. The port is terrible. The policies are very detrimental to the growth of businesses in this country. When you go to the port today, you cannot even pass. They said they are opening road and closing it. It has given room for corruption. So many people are taking money on that road. What we normally use 60,000 naira to take a container of cocoa from Oshodi to Apapa now costs 500,000 naira. If you go on batch, the entire water system is blocked. So has not added any value. It has rather dragged us back for another 10 years. So
the farmers, from the farmers you get the cocoa from, did they experience increased production? Did it bring down the cost?
When you put water on the head, it goes down to the toe. Everybody is feeling it. You see, the problem is, what was the price of these things before this border closure? How much expensive do you put to ship it out? If ordinarily you need to put 65,000 for one container to get to the port and get out, and you are now spending 500,000 to do it, definitely it will affect the farmers. It's the buying cost that will be affected, and most of the countries in the world where we compete, like Ivory Coast and Ghana, for our products, people go to them to buy from them than from us, because when you sign a contract, the other hand, that's the receiver, is not sure of when they will get the goods, because they know that your port is a problem. It's problematic. I can share you so many of these letters coming from Netherlands, from Amsterdam, from United States of America doesn't want to buy our cocoa now because they believe that the transit period is about 30 days. Your containers will spend another 2 months at the port before they go. And this is food. They cannot wait. So in the long run, it is a terrible mistake, a very unfortunate policy somersault on the close of the borders. Because ordinarily, the port is already congested.
Well, Mr. Adeniji, is this a function of the border? Because I'm talking about the ports now. Is it a function of the border closure or something that has been with us for a while, which the Office of the Vice President had an assignment to clear over time? You would know, of course, that the issue of the congestion of the ports isn't as a result of the border closure. As a matter of fact, when we had this interview with the managing director of the Nigerian Ports Authority, she made it clear to us that the border closure hasn't significantly affected their operations or given them more responsibilities in any way. So that argument, might not be, there so much, because I believe that she should have all of the facts of that. The congestion of the ports is definitely a concern, no doubt about that. I don't know. Maybe if you want to ask the port operators, they might say differently.
No, that's not true. Now, all the goods that are coming through Cotonou have not been able to come in through the road. They have to get to Cotonou. They will need to be loaded again, and they will transfer them to the Nigerian port that is already congested. If anybody is saying it does not have any negative impact on it, the bloody closure has not had any negative impact, the person is being economical with the truth. Because all these goods that are supposed to go on the road are also being loaded back and put to Nigeria. So it has increased the congestion. The waiting period before, when the port was terrible, was about 21 days.
Part of the plan,
Now,
I believe that if you listen to the central bank governor, my apologies, Mr. Adeniji, let me take this to Mr. Akpa. Part of the plan for the border closure, or hopes of government, I believe, for the border closure was that, look, maybe if we do not import some of these things, capacity to produce would increase. They cite the examples of when some items were banned from coming into Nigeria, such as fruit juice and the rest of them. Even these poultry products that we're talking about, they got on that list of products that are banned from being imported into the country. This current border closure we have, Mr. Akpa, how significantly has it improved or increased the capacity of your members to produce? Because if you listen to Mr. Adeniji, the facts are there, and you may want to validate or contradict it, that we do not still have enough poultry products in the country. Consequently, importing some of them might be a good way to balance the demand that people have for these products. So how significantly has this border closure helped to increase the capacity of your members to produce?
Well, I want us to separate one thing from the other. If we want to look at the gamut of our policies as a country, we need to look at the entire gamut of our policies, both monetary and fiscal policy. If we want to look at the policy of the border closure, which was done last year, vis-a-vis the effect, positive or negative, let's talk about it. Mr. Adeyemi has spoken, and I agree in totality with him. But the congestion in the port, I also do international business. The congestion in the port, to me, is not directly as a result of the border closure. Now, he says, yes, that the cost of poultry products has risen. The cost of poultry products has risen, possibly not because, and I'll tell you, not because of the border closure. The cost of poultry products has risen because of a lot of problems. 70 to 75% of the cost of production of poultry is basically cereals, is maize and soya. Now, because of the insecurity in the country, a lot of farmers have now been able to go to the farm. So the prices of maize at the harvest period like we are having, traditionally by this time last year, the price of maize was going at 87,000 per metric ton. Today, the price of maize is going as much as 150. This is harvest period. The price of soya, for example, by this time, last year, soya meal was 105,000 per metric ton. Today, soya is going as much as 225,000 metric tons. Now, if you buy your soya and your maize, which constitutes 75 to 80% of your cost of production, and then you produce, you have to look at the metrics of your cost of production vis-a-vis what you sell out. So to me, we don't import maize from the neighboring country into Nigeria. Neither do we import soya. But what I'm trying to say is that, look, let us look at the gamut of our policy. What is actually happening? If I produce 1 kilogram of chicken at 1,200, I can't sell at 1,200. I need to sell at 1,500. Now, the issue of allowing things to come in, Nigeria is one of the biggest countries, is the biggest country and the biggest economy in Africa. Now, it is at our advantage to produce competitively and then export to the countries in West Africa. But let us look at our policy from lending to provision of this infrastructure to subsidy. There is nowhere in the world that agriculture is never subsidized. But in our country,
Mr. Akpa, well, you have cited some issues around the matter of your production capacity. Just one moment, but I would need you to speak to. And so, of course, you have explained the reason why production has been hampered or hindered one way or another. But we'll take this further when we return from this break. Gentlemen, do stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Mr. Akpa, going by some of the arguments that you have thrown forward about the issues raised so far, it would seem like, as far as you're concerned, we didn't quite think through everything before we close to the borders. Well, on the one hand, government wanted perhaps to encourage an increased local production of some of the things that we import. But at the same time, looking at some of the other issues that you have raised, this insecurity, harvest timetable, harvest calendar, COVID-19, and so many other issues, those things weren't quite factored in and consequently have affected, the production, and is perhaps where you are now not giving us the full value for which the borders were closed. Going forward now, what should we be doing? You've talked about a holistic look at all of our policies so that they are all speaking in the same direction. What should we be looking at now, looking at the entire gamut?
Well, thank you. First, let me place it on record that the poultry industry in Nigeria has the capacity to produce for national need and then to export to the other countries in West Africa in the first instance and then to the other parts of the world. Secondly, you see, I said it in this forum on your channel the other time that we need to critically engage ourselves, both as policymakers and as stakeholders in the agricultural industry. I cannot have my people doing a different thing outside what the maize association is doing, what the soya people are doing. So we need to constantly engage ourselves. And by the time we constantly engage ourselves, we will now be able to know what is our strength and what are our weaknesses. Two, and then having understood our strength and our weaknesses, how can we fill in the gap to have a win-win situation? To me, that has been what I've been advocating. Today, if we are able to look at the entire policy, like I have said, and then now says, okay, like the ease of doing business. The ease of doing business should have something to do with the congestion in the port. Now, today, if we are to trade within ourselves as West African countries, we stand to have a lot of comparative advantage. Today, we are looking for plant protein source, and then soya is expensive. There should be other alternative. What is the other alternative? The other alternative is groundnut cake. What is the crushing capacity? What is the groundnut production in this country right away? And then what can we crush to have sufficient groundnut to alternate for soya? So if you go to Chad, for example, the crush is a lot of groundnut. So if we are able, Chad is not even within West Africa, it's in Central Africa. But since we are African countries and we're neighbors to ourselves, now with sincerity of purpose at all angles of our operations, then we will do transparent business. I cannot see a reason why Benin Republic port will be used as a dumping port of poultry products in Nigeria. That is the quarrel. So, like I have said, border closure and non-border closure is never responsible for the entire trouble at the ports. Now, if border is closed, we cannot do some relaxed businesses. But if border is closed, the essence of the border closure is to protect the local economy. Now, today, 25 million people are engaged directly and indirectly in poultry production. Now, if you now say, okay, bring in the entire 1.5 to 2 million metric tons of chicken we produce on an annual basis, then you allow Benin to be used as a dumping ground for Nigeria. And then you know that almost 5 to 10 million people will go out of employment. So that is the problem. So we need to have a synergy, the synergy of working together, and that is completely lacking in this country. We are not working together. Everybody is doing as if at all we are operating from different colonies. We are not operating from different colonies, neither from different countries. We are one. We have the same objective, and the same objective calls that we must come together, constantly engage ourselves.
Just one moment, Mr.
What is happening?
Just one moment.
Yes.
When you say we are not working together, what categories of people are you looking at that should be working together? You've talked about the maize farmers, you've talked about soya, people who deal in soya beans and all of that. What categories of people should be working together? Is it just those three, poultry producers, maize producers and soya, or there are other people that should come in the value stream?
The people in government, who don't do policy, we contribute to policy. But the people in government should have constant engagement with the people at the private sector, the people in the organized private sectors.
Okay.
I will give you an example, like the Poultry Association of Nigeria.
All right.
What affects poultry production in this country can never be known by the person at the cause of his office, other than myself and then the people on the fields. So we are not strangers to ourselves. We should have cordial relationship in such a way that we can talk and then believe that we are all working for the Nigerian project. Not that you stay within the cause of your office, you don't know how it affects me, and then you sit down there, you shun our policies. Oh, this does not work, this work. And then it is costing a lot of trouble. Like you said, the cost of, I'll give you an example of the interface that we're actually not having. Part of what is responsible for the high cost of production is tariff. Today, if you want to bring in agricultural products, the fiscal policy says agricultural products are zero duty. But if you bring any agricultural product into any of the ports in Nigeria today, they charge you duty. Customs charges you duty. Customs should be able to know that this is an agricultural machinery. Customs should be able to know that this is an agricultural equipment. But customs still charges you duty. I will tell you for micro ingredients, less than 10% of what we use in the production of feed, which is basically what sustains the poultry production, comes in from abroad. Lysine, methionine, toxin binders, vaccines, and some medications. Now, customs is still charging tariff on them, while the fiscal policy says they are zero duty. So now, what is wrong for us sitting down with customs and the people in the fiscal policy department of the Ministry of Budget and National Planning to sit down? Let's define critically this. What does the law say? It's not because you have a target to generate revenue, you start charging people arbitrarily. So this connection is not there. There's a complete disconnection. And then customs say you have a target. If you have a target, you go against the law that even also establishes you. Now somebody stays in the office, he says this has been removed. All
right, Mr. Akwa. That point is taken. Let me take this to Mr. Adeniji. Just one moment. Let me take this back to Mr. Adeniji. We've been having this conversation, and I'm sure that you're raring to respond to some of the issues. There is something that I would like you to respond to, along with whatever other comments that you may want to pass in a response to some of the issues that Mr. Akwa has raised. You deal in cocoa, and there's also been that argument out there that rather than export cocoa, isn't it possible for us to produce chocolate and the rest of them here in this country rather than export cocoa and then import chocolate at exorbitant prices? I mean, perhaps that's part of the reason why some people are saying, look, maybe we should just have it closed for a while so that we can increase local production, local capacity in production of these things. Because when you go to any shop to procure whatever brand of chocolate, it's a lot more expensive. Meanwhile, cocoa is produced here in Nigeria. What's your take on that?
Well, thank you. Mr. Akpan, thank you for agreeing to what I said earlier, that we have a problem with the policymakers. I think the policymakers are too proud to sit down with the practitioners and say, look, we have a problem. How do we move forward? These hand-down policies that, okay, this is what we think is right, and they put it on you. Even if it is bitter and it's going to be a poison, they still want you to take it. I think that has been the biggest problem we have had in this country for a long time. On the cocoa side of it, or chocolate, and I want you to understand that chocolate consumption has to do with the growth of the economy. Nigeria is a very, very poor country. Chocolate or the other products from this are luxury. They are not necessities. So it is only for countries, sincerely, that has the capacity to take it. Especially if I ask today, how many homes in Nigeria can afford a Cadbury or a Milo as their breakfast? It's very few. So this is where the government should be looking at. Anybody in this country will never be happy with exporting primary products. We genuinely want to do value addition, which is the hinting, and that's the only direction we need to go. But unfortunately, we don't have structures on ground that encourage this. Where's the electricity to do it? What is the problem with the port? Imagine if somebody has processed some of these products like butter, like cake, and want to export, and you are going to be at the port for 2 months, it's a trouble. It is something that is perishable. You will not be able to do it. Do we have the infrastructure that can support this processing? No. Where is the security? Where is the finances? So we don't have it. We need, that's what I said earlier, that the government will need to dismantle this structure and start a new one. Bringing in people, because it has never worked for the past 40 years. What we need is to sit down and say, okay, what will be our policy on this? And we have to advance it for another generation. It's not a situation whereby one government comes to power, they will destroy one policy and bring another one. You can imagine the policy on FX, on Forex. In 2016, it was 23 policies that came out, and everything went bad. Today, we have 13 or 14 exchange rates in this country, parallel, the one for school, the one for... So we have terrible policies that we need to harmonize and start to look at, okay, what is in need for this country? We need to think beyond our generation. We need to look back and look at, okay, other countries, what are they doing? We have our children and children that are coming. What are the legacies we want to give to them? Are we going to continue to do things just based on being short-sighted? Of course not.
You've talked about policy somersaults for a number of times, and I'm pretty sure some people will be wondering, just what policy specifically are you talking about? Well, Mr. Akwa has listed a number and has talked about the fact that, you know, he cited the example of the customs and all of that. So when you are talking about policy somersaults, in specific terms, which ones are you talking about? Because now that the government is already considering reopening the borders, what are those things that should be put in place to ensure that we do not reverse, or revert to closing the borders again and avoid this policy somersault you're talking about?
Okay, one of it is, as a country, we should have an harmonized policy on where we want to be in the next 20 years, in the next 10 years. We have African trade agreement we have signed. What do we want to do? In specific terms, let me take cashew, for example. Nigeria produces about 150,000 tons of cashew, and we export 140,000 tons of it to Vietnam. Why can't we? And to process cashew in Nigeria has nothing to do with electricity, but the government needs to provide the enabling environment for businesses to thrive. For example, another one, we have a policy of border closure, but some people are given the opportunity to export their goods through the roads to other countries, while other people cannot bring it to the country. So that is rigging the economy for some people. So nobody should be above the order in policy making and execution. We also need to look at, for example, where do we want to be in cocoa production in the next 20 years? Nigeria used to be number 3 in the world. We are now number 7. Our volume used to be 550,000 tons in 1978. Today, we are on 250,000 tons. We are dwindling. We are going down. So we need to quickly rescue this retrogression and see, okay, what do we need to do to come back and start to fix some things? Thanks to this government, they have started doing some things. Infrastructure development, like the trains, the train lines, the rail lines, the roads. They are putting a lot of efforts on that. But they also need to look at, okay, how do we solve the problem of electricity? How do we solve the problem of security? What about corruption? When we are talking, Mr. Akpan was saying the cost, people will not be bringing frozen fruits, food from Cotonou. That shouldn't be our problem. Our problem will be, what is the custom doing? If government has legislated, we don't want importation of this into this country. What has custom done? It's corruption. You still find them everywhere. What about imported rice? We still find them in Daleko and everywhere. The problem is not with the policy alone, it's also with implementation. We need to stamp out corruption and make sure that we have a sane, reasonable approach to our national life. As a country, we need a government and the center to have a robust policy, not play politics with our life. We need to have Sincerely,
All right, Mr.
look
Adeniji.
at everything is just upside down. So I think the most important thing
my
is
apologies,
the
Mr.
policy
Adeniji.
makers
But just to be
engage
clear,
the-
Mr. Adeniji, just one moment. Just to be clear, are you in support of government reopening the borders, and how soon do you think that should be done?
It should be done today. It is important. It's long overdue because the reason for closing the border has not been achieved. What have we achieved? Nothing. So what we need to do is open the border and increase the capacity of Nigerians to build the economy, produce more, and
Okay, all
sell
right.
to other West African countries.
Okay. Well, Mr. Onalo Akwa, what's your final take? But before you answer that one, there was something you raised the other time. You said that the conversations need to begin among stakeholders to ensure that we achieve maximally. Who, in your opinion, should take the lead in these conversations that you have suggested, given that you have also accused some government officials, especially in the Ministry of Agriculture, of not understanding the emotions or the things that you go through as poultry farmers. So this conversation you are talking about, who should be taking the lead?
Well, thank you so much. Like I have said repeatedly, and I want to put this correct, I didn't accuse the Federal Minister of Agriculture. If it is an accusation, it's to all of us. I'm accusing myself, I'm accusing you, and I'm accusing the entire Nigerians because we need to drive the policy. Just like Mr. Demi has said, we need to have a sectoral development plan. For example, if you look at the European Union Development Plan, these people look at 50 years ahead of today. If you look at the American plan, they look at 50 years ahead of today. But every time we are involved in ad hoc planning will take us nowhere. We are talking about ourselves today. We are talking about today.
All right, Mr.
What about tomorrow? What about our children?
To
me, I think we should sit down.
Just one moment, Mr. Akwa. What specifically are you asking for? Do you think the borders should be opened? Yes or no? And what should we be doing within the next 24, 48, 72 hours?
The border should be open for free trade within ourselves, but the people policing the border should police the border in such a way that we will never have prohibited items coming to be dumped in our country, thereby undermining our local production capacity and potential.
All right, then. Thank you very much for your thoughts and your time this morning, gentlemen. We have been speaking with Mr. Onalo Akwa, who is the Director General, Poultry Farmers Association of Nigeria, as well as Mr. Adeniyi Adeniji. He's an agro-entrepreneur, an exporter, Chief Executive Officer, Starling Global and Ideal Limited. He is an exporter of cocoa and cashew. Gentlemen, both of them joined us. Mr. Akwa joined us from Nasarawa, and Mr. Adeniji joined us from Lekki in Lagos. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. Sunrise Daily continues in a moment on another issue. Do stay with us.
Well, it's been 12 days since that sad and gruesome killing of rice farmers in Borno State. And ever since that time, so much has happened at various levels. I mean, we've had meetings with governors, meetings with the presidents, deliberations at the National Assembly, all in a bid to just try to figure out this whole security conundrum. How do we get out of this? What have we been doing wrong? And what can we do right? Well, we're counting down to the president's appearance at the National Assembly. Well, he has promised to appear, but of course, there's still a lot of uncertainty around it. So we'll be focusing on that in this second part of the program, and joining us on the program to take a look at some of the issues that have come up politically, security-wise, and constitutionally. We have Mr. David Otto, an international defense and counterterrorism specialist. He joins us via Zoom from London. And Mr. Monday Obani is a legal practitioner joining us also via Zoom from Lagos Island. Gentlemen, good morning. Well, Mr.
Good morning.
Obani, let me begin with you because, I mean, there are a lot of constitutional issues around the president's appearance. And, I mean, that's, if you look at the front pages of the dailies, that's what you will find. So let's start from that point, especially the AGF statement about the president's appearance or the House of Representatives summon. And he says that as a commander-in-chief, the president has exclusivity on security and has confidentiality over security. These powers and rights he does not share. So by summoning the president on national security operational matters, the House of Representatives operated outside constitutional bounds. Do you agree with the AGF?
Well, thank you for having me. I do not share the same sentiment with the Honorable Attorney General as to the issue of the president not being invited by the members of the National Assembly. I don't think that the word security has acquired a magic wand. When used, scares away people. If you look at the section of the Constitution that he was referring to, was talking about Section 218 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. There is no doubt about the fact that the president determines the operational issue of the usage of the armed forces of this country. That is not in contention. That section never said that in determining the operational use of the armed forces, that the National Assembly members cannot invite the president, especially if you look into Section 88 and Section 89, which is a combined effect that gives them the power to carry out what we call oversight function. In any matter today, as I speak to you, where the National Assembly has what we call legislative competence, any matter they have legislative competence on, they have a right to invite any person and then even cause an inquiry or investigation to be carried out into such a matter of national importance. If you remember, as you recalled, the killing that took place in Borno State, where 43, where the surgeons are even contradicting the figures and saying that the kill more happened, and there was a national outrage. And people felt, what is going on with the amount of money that has been budgeted for security in this country? Why our lives not secured? Why our property is not secured in the country? And there was a resolution passed by the House, both Senate and that of the House of Reps. Independently, the House of Reps said, look, they want the president to come and explain what is actually going on with the usage of the fund, the issue of security, and some other issues in order to clarify the position whether he is effectively policing Nigerian state. So there is nothing wrong. It's a constitutional issue. And the president is under legal and moral obligation to honor that invitation.
Okay, Mr. Obani, thank you for that premise. We'll build on it, but before then, we'll have to go on this break and we'll get Mr. Otto's initial statements before we explore this topic even further. Gentlemen, please stay with us. You're welcome back. Now, Mr. Otto, you have done some extensive research into terrorism, Boko Haram, ISWAP, and the rest. So you have an understanding really about the operation. So just before we talk about the president's planned appearance and, you know, the uncertainties surrounding it, let's talk about that killing, that gruesome killing in Koshebe village. I mean, there's been a lot of reaction to it, which is why we're having, this conversation in the first place. So if we could go back to that killing, really, what is your response to it? When you saw that, what did you decipher from it?
Thank you very much. Of course, the first reaction is sympathy to the bereaved ones, but also to the victims. Condolences to them, gruesome as it may. What we see here, if you want to go into the Zabamari massacre and you look at it from a context of the current insurgency, what you find out is that this was a reactive attack, which was carried out by the faction of Abubakar Shekau. That's what he's claimed. Of course, as you rightly mentioned, there are two main factions that operate within those areas. That's the Abubakar Shekau faction and the Islamic State of West Africa faction. It's one of those attacks which was carried out as a result of the battle to win hearts and minds. This community, the Zabamari community, has been very much engaged with seeing something, say something strategy, which is to give information to the Nigerian security when they see any suspicious activities of Boko Haram members. And that is what is expected of each and every Nigerian, because, of course, the whole strategy is that, the army or the security agencies cannot win this war without information coming from the local communities. Now, the issue is how protected are these communities when they give out such vital information. And that is where the battle lines have been drawn between the Boko Haram factions that operate in very remote areas and the Nigerian security architecture. Of course, these are very vast areas. I mean, these communities are located in areas where it takes hours for any kind of a reactive force to get to these locations. But what we are looking at now is the ability of law enforcement, but also of local authority, to be able to reinstate itself in parts of northern Borno and Borno in general. Remember that Borno has been under a state of emergency since 2013, when it was declared by ex-President Goodluck Jonathan. So it's at a state of war. But the decision of the governor, Professor Zulum, to have the elections which have recently taken place for the first time since 2007, for the past 13 years, has given Boko Haram, some kind of a punch in the face, because what Boko Haram relies on for these past years is an ungoverned space. So the attack on the Zabamari community is a reaction to these factors, one of which being the recent election, which was successfully held. Boko Haram sees that as haram and believes that the communities that took part in these elections, are against the Boko Haram's, propaganda of, continuously taking control of these territories, when indeed, they have presence. And they use this presence to launch these attacks spontaneously when the security forces are looking the other way.
So based on this premise now, I was reading a particular interview you had with Gbero Adeoye, and you said there that you don't discuss the places you have been to, invited to, or not been, unless that this is relevant to a greater good for an existing but confidential peace plan. So it would seem when it comes to issues regarding terrorism and all, you're quite conservative. Now, let's talk about the president's planned appearance. I'm sure you've been following the conversation. Do you think the president should appear before the National Assembly or not?
I think, Nigeria is at a state of war. I mean, especially in the Borno state. And I don't see any reason why the president shouldn't show up at the National Assembly to discuss issues of that great relevance, of national security for that matter. I don't think it's a matter of constitutional correctness. I think it's a matter of national security. And in times of war, the extraordinary steps are taken by the commander-in-chief, whose responsibility is primary. Again, of course, the current massacre, it's something which, it's just one massacre of many that, have happened since 2009. And, I believe that any, kind of, summons, or what they call it, for the president to have these discussions and come up with a strategic plan that will direct the operations on ground is extremely relevant. And I don't think it should be questioned, on the basis of constitutional correctness. So I agree that, yes, the president should indeed, be talking to the members of the National Assembly.
So, gentlemen, I think you're on the same page regarding the president's appearance and the Constitution. So, Mr. Obani, you've seen the uncertainty which the AGF statement caused, because we had the president's aide on social media saying the president will be attending, gave a date. We had the Speaker of the House of Representatives after the meeting with the president saying, well, the president is concerned about security and he has given me his word. He even said that the Senate president was a witness. So what do you make of this conflicting, statements? You have the APC governors also said to be prevailing on the president not to appear before the House of Reps. What do you make of this back and forth, really?
It's clearly embarrassing. I remember vividly, I think a day after the resolution was passed by the members of the House of Representatives, the Right Honorable Speaker, Gbajabiamila, paid a visit to Aso Villa, and he came out smiling, giving an impression that he met a father and a Democrat. And I remember, describing the president in such, swelling a manner, giving an impression that this is a president that listens to a Democrat and that he's going to honor that invitation at a date and time to be agreed upon. Then the aide to the president, I think 2 or 3 days later, on her tweet, verified tweet, also confirmed the fact that the president is going to address the joint house of the National Assembly. And that, of course, gave some of us the impression that really the president is really a Democrat and somebody that is interested in giving and finding a solution to the security issue and challenge in this country, and he will be able to address Nigerians, the true representatives of the people. And so until the governors of APC and some of the APC stakeholders, came to the president and started dissuading the president that he should not order that invitation. I understand that their fear, especially that those of the governors, that they won't want a situation where such will be replicated in the State House of Assembly, where they will be invited to give account to some of their stewardship. So they now dissuaded the president. And then the next thing we heard was the Attorney General, who was now trying to find a legal meaning to dishonoring that invitation. But he made a mess of the entire explanation because he could not pinpoint any provision of the Constitution. Because I looked at his speech. What section is he referring to? And I have said it here. He was referring to Section 218. Is anyone quarreling with the fact that the president is the one that controls the use of the armed forces? He's the one that determines the operational use. Fine. The Constitution says in determining that operational use, he cannot in any way be invited by the House to give answer to certain issues that has to do with the national policy or security. So I didn't know where he's coming from, honestly, because I look at his words and I was looking at him to show any particular section of the Constitution that expressly said that the president of this country under democracy cannot answer to the National Assembly members on issue that has to do with a matter they have legislative competence. I didn't see any. So to me, it is more of politics. It is more of politics. It is more of the APC governors who do not want a situation where they will be held accountable in their various states. Try now to persuade the president that has already built a reputation for himself, who has even given the impression that he will honor the invitation. So why would the president now, all of a sudden, in any case, it's important we also note that the president has not officially declined that invitation, because the members of the House yesterday, stated it expressly that they have not received any contrary opinion that the president will not honor that invitation until the express word comes from the presidency. I think that the president should be himself.
One of the arguments that a number of people, just one moment, one of the arguments some other observers may put forward is that, look, in the 200 years or thereabout of the presidential system of government in the United States of America, which we claim to be copying, there's hardly been any time when the Congress or their National Assembly summoned the president, so to speak. So perhaps that is a step or a foothold for some people to say, why should the president honor the invitation of the National Assembly? How do you respond to that?
I don't have such a historical antecedent, and so I may not be in a position to contradict you. But the point is that has there been any time the members of the Congress had invited the president and he refused to honor that invitation? That would be the right attitude to it and right question to it. So if there has been an instance where the Congress had invited the president of the United States of America and he fails to and say, look, I am relying on a constitutional provision that gives me that immunity for me now to honor the people by honoring, by coming to answer some of the questions they want to ask. There has not been any instance. You have not cited any, but I cannot in any way contradict you because I don't have any historical fact with regards to that. But I'm saying, based upon Nigerian Constitution,
But
1999, I have given you
historical perspectives.
Yes.
One moment, Mr. Obani. Historical perspectives here come, to Nigeria. Of course, there is also talk in some circles that it has happened in Nigeria before, that a president has been invited and that they haven't honored the invitation of the National Assembly. So this will not be a first if the president doesn't show up.
I was trying to cite a section of the Constitution that says, to the contrary, that the Nigerian president can be invited by the members of the House. Our Section 88, the combined effect of Section 88 and Section 89 is important to read it. If you want me to read it, that particular section says that the National Assembly has power to cause inquiry, to be on any matter they have legislative competence on, including causing investigation into any matter, any agency, against any person who they have actually enacted a law governing or covering the area that they want to investigate upon. And then Section 89 says, in doing this, in the matter of evidence, they can invite any person. The Constitution was very express as any person. That any person includes the president. So what is not excluded cannot be included. What is included cannot be excluded. So it is important we know that the provision of our Constitution is very unique with regards to the powers of the National Assembly to cause inquiry into any matter they have powers to make laws upon. And as I said earlier, do National Assembly members in this country have power to appropriate funds for security? They do. Do they have power to make any law, to correct any defect on security? They do. And as long as they have such powers, then there is no reason why the president cannot. And the president himself has even agreed to honor that invitation. So it is just politics that is being played now by members of the APC by dissuading the president. Now, that is actually the truth.
Just one moment, Mr. Obani. Now, that is a given. Given the fact that, the Attorney General of the Federation, who is the chief law officer in the nation, is making this statement now, according to the Constitution that you have quoted, would the president be demeaning the Constitution or breaking the law in any way if he does not honor the invitation of the National Assembly?
That is the correct situation. If the president dishonors this invitation, I will tell you that it will actually damage a bit of his reputation, and it's not in his interest. The Attorney General has given him a very wrong advice, and I will advise the president, for some of us that love him, that actually stood in the sun and rain in order to ensure his ascendancy to power, that his reputation will remain intact if he does honor this invitation. By going there, he can refuse to answer any question that actually breach any of this issue of protocol on issue of security. He can say, no, I cannot answer this question with regards to this. He can decide not to answer any question that will actually implicate our security protocol. But that the president will say that he has constitutional right not to honor that invitation, we actually, do a very great damage, collateral damage to his reputation, and will not present him as being described as a Democrat and as a father of the nation.
Right. So, Mr. Otto, if we could just preview the president's planned appearance later on today, maybe in the next 1 or 2 hours before the National Assembly, just what would you expect to hear from the president? What kind of issues would you like him to speak to regarding the security situation?
I think, first of all, let me touch on what my colleague, my co-panelist has talked about in terms of, I think you did mention the comparison with the United States, whether the Congress can oblige the president. And of course, the answer is no. The Congress can invite the president, as we saw in the case when President Donald Trump was invited to give evidence at the Congress, but he turned that down. So there is one thing to invite the president, and it is under the president's discretion whether he should attend or not. But the comparison with Nigeria, it's quite different because America is not in the state of war. Nigeria, especially in the northern part, is in a state of war. Again, as I mentioned, the state of emergency that has been existing for the past 7 years. So, if the Congress, if the House of National House of Assembly is inviting the president to attend, again, it's the law says they can. It doesn't mean that the president is obliged to attend. But in a state of war, there is a moral responsibility, not a legal one, for the president to attend, the summons, especially because it talks about national security, and to which the president is the commander-in-chief. So that has to be made very clear in that perspective. Now, what is the president going to talk about? Depends on what the National Assembly wants to ask the president. But of course, the issues of, the stability of the nation. Remember, the president came to power. He won the election on the basis that, he would, get rid of Boko Haram. I watched and I read the Global Terrorism Index for 2019, and it places Nigeria second to the list after Afghanistan in terms of the number of attacks that have been carried out by any terrorist organization in the world. That means Nigeria plays a very strategic role, and the president is at the helm of that. He must be able to give account to the members of the National Assembly, especially because he controls the police and the military. That is at the forefront of tackling this insurgency crisis. And I'm not just talking about the North. I mean, we've seen issues arising in the Middle Belt with the Heather farmer crashes. We've seen an increase in the number of kidnappings, just after the disbandment of SARS, but also before that. So the national security issues in the country are quite, they're accelerating, if I may say. And the president needs to be able to give his account as to how he will be able to deal with these issues, not just from a strategic point of view, but also from an operational perspective, which he doesn't control. So I think the questions would be, I suppose so. I'm just, I don't know what the National Assembly is going to ask him, but, the questions would be, how would you tackle this ongoing insecurity in all the parts of Nigeria, not just the North? And the simple answer, in my opinion, if I were the president, of course, which I'm not, would be to, talk about the role that the military plays in countering terrorism in the North, but also other insecurities all over the country, and to make sure that there is a coordination and collaboration, not just from other sister agencies, but also from the population. But in order to do that, the government needs to ensure, and I'm talking about the state governments here, but also the federal government, they need to ensure that there is enough security, there is enough protection of civilians in such a way that they can contribute towards information and intelligence gathering that will enable the security agencies to deal with the insecurity that is happening in Nigeria.
Latching onto that operational perspective which you brought in, saying that the president does not have control over it, there have been a lot of suggestions, really, from governors to the National Assembly. For example, the governor of Borno State suggested having mercenaries, having more people from Borno State in the Nigerian military. The Senate has suggested the sacking of the service chiefs and some other suggestions, really, from Nigerians, all about the security situation. So looking at those suggestions, which one of them do you think would affect the operational angle of this fight against insecurity in general?
I think let me talk about the first one first. Of course, that's the idea that the government should bring in, the Borno State government should bring in mercenaries. Mercenaries will only be effective, if they can blend and engage with the national forces. I'm talking about the Nigerian Army and the Nigerian Police Service, and other units that are operational on ground. So if you bring a mercenary from outside, they still need their hands to be held. But the advantage of having a mercenary is that these forces are not corrupted by any sentiments or any political or affiliations which could impact on their judgments or their operational activity. So by having them, there could be a balance. But also, you've got to look at it from the moral perspective, where the military can believe that bringing in mercenaries is a clear indication that they failed. But an insurgency war is not as simple as the public sees it. It's a very complex war because you have jihadists that can blend very easily with the local population. Now, in terms of the second, premises of whether the service chiefs should be sacked or not, my opinion has always been to look at the gains that the service chiefs have made, as opposed to some of the disadvantages or some of their weaknesses that they've expressed in the operational theater, and ask the question of who are you bringing next, and what are those individuals that you're planning to bring in? What are they doing now? Are they not involved in the theater of war? And if they're involved, what makes you believe that their strategy is going to be different? Of course, people would say to you that it's a matter of leadership. But when a country is at war, each and every top general is involved in the strategy, is involved in the operations. So I don't believe changing the service chiefs, from an operational point of view, will make any difference to the ongoing war. But it's up to the president, to make that decision. I think what should be happening is that we should be having all hands on deck. All security agencies coming up and putting forward their strategic plan in order to defeat the menace of Boko Haram. Changing the chiefs, in my opinion, I think
now, all of that has been part of the conversation. Just one moment. All of that has been part of the conversation that's been on in the media space for long enough. The president has said that the members of the security forces have been adequately mobilized and that more infrastructure is coming in for them. That is already out there. He made that advice. He gave that advice to governors to improve on local intelligence. He has also promised a number of things, to fast track, to energize, to strengthen the national security architecture and all of that. What specifically would you be expecting to be new in the address or conversations of the president with the National Assembly? Anything new you're expecting?
I think the only new thing is coordination, communication, and collaboration of service, security service, representatives, whether they be chiefs or other police or military, civil defense forces, the intelligence units. I think there has been a huge, gap between that collaboration, not just internally within Nigeria itself, but neighboring states, that surround Nigeria are not doing their bit. And, because of that, there are so many gaps that have been exploited. For example, in the northern part of Nigeria, where Cameroon does what they do best, Niger Republic does what they do best, Nigeria does what it does best. But none of these countries are really genuinely coordinating and collaborating their efforts. So whatever you do within Nigeria, it's not sufficient enough to get rid of Boko Haram, for example, and that applies to all other menaces that Nigeria faces. So I think what the president should be saying to the National Assembly is, look, let us find a way that we can have a robust strategy, within the state and within the working with the federal government, that we can deal with this terrorism and security crisis. It's not a one-man's job, and the military shouldn't be giving people the impression that they can win this war on their own. It doesn't happen. And that is why I blame the military, because they give the impression that they can win this war. But this is a war that should be won and could be won by collaboration and coordination of all other sister agencies.
Right. Now, clearly, Mr. Albani, there is a present challenge, which is insecurity. Well, the National Assembly is trying to play its role by inviting the president to speak on it. But, beyond this, really, what options are available to the National Assembly if they say, well, we really need to go the long haul in ensuring that security is done right? What are the options available?
Well, I think part of the reason why they may have wanted the president to come is to know what are the challenges, because they are the one that is acute. Funds have been made available. All the necessary support has been given to the executive. And over time, we've been hearing that this insurgency has been degraded. and now there is this rising of the banditry in the northwest, and so they need to have factual situation on ground in order to either increase the funding or in the laws they will make, and that is the purpose actually of oversight function, and that is why they needed the president to come and then have a tete-a-tete over this particular issue that has become a problem to us as a nation. Lives have been lost clearly on a daily basis. The entire northern region is clearly under stress. So he needed to be there in order to give them that insight. So if the president fails or neglects to be there, I think that other methods they can also use in order to ensure that the Nigerian state is properly policed. They may go through issue of maybe extra budgeting, if it is issue of money. As I said earlier, the president being there would have actually given them an opportunity to know what are the challenges that are on ground. Because over time, the president has given this impression that he has provided all that is needed to be provided, and the men on ground will also do the thing they're supposed to do. Now, remember that they have passed several resolutions asking the president to remove the service chiefs, and up to now, the president has not done that. So that is part of the question they will ask. So if these people have not been removed, and you have refused to remove them, what are the things you are going to do in order to correct all the mistakes that have been made over time in securing Nigeria?
Well, we're all counting down to that planned appearance by the president before the National Assembly. But gentlemen, I'd like to thank you so much for your time on the program, Mr. David Otto, as well as Mr. Monday Obani. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I'll stay with Channels Television for live coverage of that planned appearance by the president before the National Assembly later today. Well, we have a few messages, tweets actually, concerning some of the issues we raised on the program today. And I'll begin with this one from TT Tor on the state of a polity, saying we are at war and nobody seems to be taking it seriously. If you count the casualties from inception of this Boko Haram scourge, the numbers supersede most wars in Europe and the Middle East. Why are we sitting on our hands, he says.
Well, this one is from Professor Enakina, who talks about the border closure. Says our egregious and jaded economic policies and lack of basic infrastructure needed by local industries to survive and compete with substandard goods from abroad, our broken currency and high interest rates make the closure of the border a futile attempt and baseless ordeal. Well, that's the program today, gentlemen and ladies, wherever you are watching us. Thank you so much for your time, and hope we have been able to make your day. My name is Ayo Makine. Have a wonderful day, and please keep safe.
And I'm Kayode Okikiolu. Thank you for joining us.